In my humble opinion, the M. Night Shyamalan film The Village is one of the best and most profoundly important movies he has ever made. The problem is that it also happens to be one of his most underrated and the first of his major cinematic films to experience largely unfavourable reviews from both the audience and the critics. One of the great tragedies of modern cinema is that, to this day, these reviews still unfairly taint what is actually a very good piece of filmmaking. Yes, M. Night Shyamalan has made some bad movies, but this is definitely not one of them. I personally believe the reason that this film came in for such unfair criticism at the time of its release, and is still wrongly considered to be a dud by many people today, is twofold. Firstly, it was poorly marketed. I clearly remember the publicity for this film and the absurdly false expectations that were created in the lead up to its release. In a nutshell, we were all wrongly led to believe that The Village was going to be a horror movie, and The Village is definitely not a horror. It is a drama with elements of mystery and suspense. Secondly, this was M. Night Shyamalan's fourth major film, and by the time it hit theatres, his reputation had been well and truly established as the director of those movies with the shocking twist in the tale. This was a problem though, because unlike his previous films, the twist at the end of The Village was not meant to be as impacting as the twists in his previous movies were. Even though the twist is important to one particular aspect of this film, explaining the history and the motivation of the characters, it doesn't introduce a seismic shift to the emphasis and to the plot in the way that his previous twists had done. I think this frustrated a lot of people, especially when combined with the fact that they were already operating under false expectations about exactly what type of movie they were going to be seeing. You could say that the shocking twist of The Village was not actually in the movie itself, but rather it was found in the unfulfilled expectations that the audience had about the film. But The Village is a movie that has been unfairly maligned. The writing is excellent, the camera work and cinematography are some of the best you'll see, there are some amazing performances from the lead actors, and the score is memorable in its beauty. This is also a film that offers authentic mythology and a depth of storytelling that speaks to some big questions about the human experience. For me, there are some clear allusions to the Lord of the Rings in The Village. Firstly, the village in the film is pretty much the Shire of the Lord of the Rings, and just like the Shire, this village also faces a major looming darkness from outside that will eventually come to disrupt the peaceful safety of the enclave that they have made for themselves there. And just like the Lord of the Rings, our lead character, Ivy Walker, is very reminiscent of Frodo. She must undertake an arduous journey and complete the most important task in the entire story, despite the fact that she is the most ill-equipped to actually carry out that task. And just like Frodo, it is her innocence and humility that allows her to be entrusted with the great burden that is laid upon her shoulders. A burden that doesn't end with her return to the village, because the trial she undergoes will forever change her very understanding of reality and who she actually is. There is a lot of symbolism, metaphor and allegory in The Village. Not only are the visuals extremely poetic in places, but at times they are crafted in the way a painting or a still image would be crafted in order to convey certain meaning. Ivy Walker is very Christ-like, and she must undergo a passion of sorts, a trial of suffering that even includes being abandoned by those closest to her and falling into a pit and then resurrecting herself. The grave swallows her, but she overcomes the grave and is raised to new life, and in doing so, she becomes a saviour to many others. She even adopts the pose of the crucifixion at the mouth of the grave in order to defeat the beast who seeks to destroy her. There is other visual symbolism that is also very important in The Village too. We see this most clearly in the two competing colours. Red is the colour of the evil in this movie, and that's not by accident. This is the very same colour that is associated with vice and the absence of virtue, especially that of uncontrolled passions. When someone is said to be seeing red, for example, they are someone who has become enraged beyond all moral restraint. And in the final book of the Christian scriptures, the book of the Apocalypse or Revelation, in chapter 17, we read the following: "Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hands filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. So here, scarlet, which is the same shade of red we see in The Village, is the colour of Babylon, and Babylon is the very name that we give to modern cities that are full of corruption, vice and evil, which is obviously exactly what the inhabitants of The Village are fleeing from in this film. Like I said, this isn't accidental. And then there is the colour of The Village, yellow, which might initially seem odd since yellow is commonly associated with cowardice. But yellow also has another connotation that isn't so commonly thought of, and that is the fact that it is often associated with the story of a woman of destiny who must undergo some trial while she awaits for her beloved to return. Apparently the song She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, which encapsulates these very themes, was brought to America by the English Puritans. This obvious connection between a group of fictional separatists living in a village in Pennsylvania that is plagued by fear of a supernatural menace and the real historical Puritans who came to New England seems highly unlikely to be coincidental. At the end of the day though, The Village is a film about authentic love. It is a treatise that presents the 4 different types of love to us in fact. Again, I don't think this is mere coincidence, because immediately before Lucius Hunt is stabbed by Noah Percy, he delivers his final line of spoken dialogue in the film, and what he says is this: there are different types of love. This seems to be a reference to C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves, which explores the nature of human love from a Christian philosophical perspective. In that work, Lewis explains the 4 different categories or types of love. The first is storge, which is empathy or affection, and is most often expressed in the familial bond between parents and their children. This is exactly the type of love that the movie begins with, when we see the opening shot of August Nicholson grieving over the coffin containing his dead son. The second love is philia, or friendship. This is the very same love that is the hallmark of The Village. Their life together originated in and is forged by profound and loving friendship. The third type of love is eros, or romantic love. We see this in the love between Kitty Walker and Christoph Kane, and between Lucius and Ivy. In fact, engagement and marriage are both important recurring themes in the first half of this film. The fourth and final love is agape. This is unconditional self-giving love, the greatest of the loves and the pinnacle of virtue. It is also the most important aspect of this film. This is the very love that the movie was created to glorify and to point us towards. The first part of this film focuses on the first 3 loves, but the final act is reserved for a much deeper exploration of agape. Agape is the crescendo of this film. It is the love that forever changes our characters, and it is the pinnacle of loving that all the other loves are directing them towards and calling them to embrace. During the course of The Village, 5 important relationships or events are presented to us, but not all of them are marked by the virtuous self-giving love of agape. The first of these 5 is the relationship and failed attempt at engagement between Kitty Walker and Lucius Hunt. This is most definitely not agape, instead it is mere infatuation, and it represents one of the most common confusions that marks our age when it comes to love. What exists between Kitty and Lucius is nothing more than mere sentimentality and emotionalism on the part of Kitty Walker. Almost all romantic relationships begin with infatuation, but if they do not move beyond that point, the 2 people involved will not grow in maturity and the relationship simply will not last. Infatuation is feelings-based, it is self-centered, it is the false idol of modern pop music, and it has become the far too common destructive force that drives many bad relationship decisions in the modern era. Then there is Noah's relationship to Ivy. This is also definitely not agape. It is the exact opposite, in fact. What we see unfold is lust on the part of Noah, who views Ivy as an object that he possesses, even to the point where he is willing to kill Lucius in order to take what he wants. Then when he fails, he becomes so consumed by vice that he is willing to kill Ivy, the supposed object of his longing, in order to satisfy his own desire to control and possess her. This is another great crisis of loving that plagues our modern age, where we use each other as disposable things for the sake of our own selfish pleasure-seeking, instead of seeing and loving the other as a profound good that must never be objectified. Next, there is the relationship between the village elders, in particular, the moment when they all agree to allow Ivy to leave the village in order to save Lucius. In this moment, the elders are exercising agape love, in that they have placed the good of Lucius and his well-being ahead of even that of their most beloved project and life's defining work, the village. In doing so, they are doing the exact opposite of Noah, and they are refusing to treat Lucius as a means to an end, as a mere object for their own self-gratification. They are willing to sacrifice their most important and prized treasure for the good of Lucius. Then there is the relationship between Edward and Alice. Edward clearly has feelings of infatuation for Alice and she for him, but he is also a married man, and so to act on these attractions would be an act of lust that would be failing to show authentic self-giving love for Edward's wife and children, whom he has already pledged himself to. But he doesn't just refuse to violate his marriage vows by not committing an act of adultery, he is also willing to sacrifice his daughter Ivy in order to save Alice's son Lucius. This is a truly profound display of agape love from Edward, where he has actively and self-sacrificially placed the good of others ahead of his own desires and comfort. This is a powerful, and in the context of modern storytelling, an extremely rare presentation of authentic self-giving love in this type of scenario, where usually the two parties would simply choose to satisfy their desires and commit adultery, rather than transcend their urges and choose the more perfect path of authentic self-giving love. Lastly, and most importantly of all, there is the love between Ivy and Lucius. For both of them, the love is clearly unconditional, and the proof of this is found in their actions. Lucius puts himself in harm's way in order to ensure the well-being of Ivy when the creatures invade the village. But this is not mere infatuation that is lacking in rational forethought, like the immature emotionalism of Kitty Walker. This is authentic, self-giving love. It's not just Ivy that Lucius risks his own safety to protect when the creatures come, it's everyone else around him in the village as well. This shows us that he is a man of virtue, and that the eros and filial love he has for Ivy is informed and directed by the agape love and virtue that he has already cultivated and made the cornerstone of his life. As he says to Ivy when she asks him later why he doesn't show fear like the others do, "I do not worry about what will happen, only about what needs to be done." In other words, it is not self-interest that motivates him to act, but goodness and truth. He takes action because he knows that it is the right thing to do, and as such, it is the thing that needs to be done, regardless of his feelings. The night after the creatures come to the village, Ivy finds Lucius keeping watch on the porch of the Walker family home in order to protect her. At which point Lucius delivers one of my favourite moments of dialogue in the movie when he says, "The only time I feel fear as others do is when I think of you in harm. That is why I am on this porch, Ivy Walker. I fear for your safety before all others, and yes, I will dance with you on our wedding night." This isn't blind infatuation, this is a man who already knows how to authentically love, and who is drawn to one woman above all others because he sees that same life of virtue in her. Another very important theme in this film is the issue of suffering. The very reason this village exists is because it has been established as a safe haven against the suffering caused by sin and evil in the world, the excesses of man's free will, where human dignity is disregarded and persons are treated with cruelty, barbarism and violence. But as August Nicholson tells Lucius in the opening act of the film, "You may run from sorrow as we have, but sorrow will find you." Which is why the decision of the elders to allow Ivy to leave the village in order to save Lucius is so very important. This is a pivotal crossroads in the life of their little community, and in making the decision that they do, they have allowed love, and not fear of evil and suffering, to become the defining principle of their life together. This is actually a really important moment in the life of that village, because authentic community is impossible if it is not underpinned by virtue and authentic self-giving love. Without agape, the village is doomed to become little more than a fearful commune with no real future to speak of. August Nicholson again sums things up perfectly when at this point in the story he declares, "Let her go. If it ends, it ends. We can move towards hope. It's what's beautiful about this place. We must not run from heartache. My brother was slain in the towns. The rest of my family died here. Heartache is a part of life. We know that now. Ivy's running toward hope. Let her run. If this place is worthy, she will be successful in her quest. That final line is actually profoundly important. August is not simply expressing some vague hope for a positive outcome. Instead, he is saying that if their vision for founding the village and the subsequent culture they have established really is one of goodness, truth and beauty, then it will have equipped Ivy with every good thing she needs to fulfill her mission. This isn't just a crucible moment for Ivy and Lucius, it is also a crucible moment for the very village itself. She is the test, the purifying fire that will determine whether their work has crafted something precious and lasting or something that is merely made of straw and which will be easily burnt up by what happens next. In the end, Ivy is the fruit of the village, the embodiment of their virtue and communal love for each other and for goodness, truth and beauty, which is precisely why she succeeds in her mission and is able to overcome even death itself. The village isn't just a beautiful and well-told story, it also serves as an important guide to human meaning, which is found not in self-gratification and hedonism, but in self-giving love, even when the cost required of us to love authentically seems insurmountably high. It is in paying that cost that we become more authentically and fully human and move from the merely superficial into something profoundly deep, sacred and life-giving. It is also a movie about authentic human society, which cannot thrive if fear becomes the guiding principle or the members live only to satisfy their own personal wants and desires. Without agape, without goodness, truth and beauty, human society is doomed, and right now, that is a message that the West desperately needs to heed more than at any other time in its history. It is my belief that the three most important films M. Night Shyamalan has ever made are Unbreakable, Signs, and The Village, because these three films explore some profoundly important truths about the human experience. If I was asked to rank these films in order of their importance, I would definitely put The Village at the top of the list as the most important film M. Night Shyamalan has ever made. Why? Well, because The Village is the cinematic embodiment of one of the most important religious doctrines ever espoused. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Or as Edward Walker tells the village elders, the world moves for love. It kneels before it in awe. If you've enjoyed this content, please like, share and subscribe, and consider financially supporting the channel by using the links below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.